Welcome to episode 6 of Islington Mill and, the monthly podcast series about the cultural life of one of the UK's most beloved artist-led creative centres, Salford's Islington Mill. It's exciting times at the Mill. There's a real buzz about the place at the moment. If you've been listening to the podcast, you will know that the mammoth and seemingly never-ending ongoing construction works that have been going on at the mill for the last 5 years, but particularly the last 2 and a bit years, are coming to an end. And most of the scaffolding from around the building has been removed, which is a lovely thing to see. But even better than that, even more exciting, this weekend sees the return of the legendary Islington Mill live venue and club space, which is opening its doors to bands, DJs and punters for the first time in 5 years, as we see the return of the awesome Fat Out Fest to its spiritual home and the place where it all started, Islington Mill. To celebrate this momentous occasion, I've put together a very special episode of Islington Mill and, which is a bit of a departure from our normal format. This is going to be a show of 2 halves, 2 separate interviews, and interspersed between all the talky bits there's going to be a selection of music curated by Emma Thompson, the curator and promoter of Fat Out Fest herself. She has chosen a track by one each of 3 of the artists who are playing at Fat Out Fest over the weekend, and those tunes are going to be bookending 2 interviews. The first interview that I've got coming up on this month's podcast is with Al Wilson, with a little cameo appearance by Geordie, who, if you're at the mill or you have been around the mill in the last quite a long time actually, you will know Al as the handy person who looks after the physical side of the building and all the complaints about, you know, doors breaking, toilets getting stuck and all that kind of stuff. I spoke to Al earlier this week in the actual club space itself, as he and Geordie were in there with some of the people stripping it out and decking it out for the return of Fat Out Fest, for the site to be returned to its original use as a venue bar. So I spoke to Al to get the lowdown on what exactly is going on with the venue space at the moment, and to talk the listeners through the general changes in the physical appearance of the mill and the buildings and what's basically been going on for the last 2 to 5 years, that kind of period when a lot of people who would have been coming to the mill for gigs and club nights and live events and, you know, spoken word, film screenings, all that kind of stuff, the period when those people haven't been able to come to see those things at the mill because the venue space had been changed into something else. And well, now that it's changing back, I got Al to talk us through what that process entails, but also to give a general overview of the other changes that have been happening at Islington Mill, particularly the incorporation of some of the other buildings and the gallery space and the 5th floor and all the beautiful things that we've got coming up for you in the future. Al's going to be talking you through that. And for part 2 of this month's Islington Mill podcast, I've got a great interview with the legendary underground live music and club promoter and gig booker and event booker and all-around good egg, Riv Burns, who was one of the first people actually to book live music and things and club nights like that at Islington Mill. Not the first, but kind of, to me, she was the first one I met who was doing it when I started coming to the mill about 12 years ago. And as far as I'm aware, I feel like Riv kind of had the first official post. I could be wrong there, but I always feel like she was the person who got so many of these balls rolling, including the awesome Off of Their Heads parties, who me and my partner were involved in some of them back in the day, which is almost a decade ago now, which is crazy to think about. But for part 2, I'm going to be talking to Riv Burns, who is working to co-promote Fat Out with Emma and also is bringing Off With Their Heads back for a special event on this Saturday as part of the Saturday programming for Fat Out Fest 2022. Riv is going to talk you through everything that's coming up on the bill for Fat Out 2022, so keep listening if you want to know what's coming up and the things that pique your interest that might make you want to come back down to the mill and check it out if you haven't been here to see a live gig in 5 years. There has been Regent's Trading Estate, which is around the back, and there's been some great events happening there, but the significance of the original club venue space downstairs from me now opening up again. It was the first part of Islington Mill that I ever walked into once I left the corridor, basically, to see Kings of Long Arms in 2010, and the place where I felt like I walked through the door and I was like, this is me, I feel home. I'm only been in Manchester a couple of weeks, literally, but this is my vibe and this is my place. So it's a very, very significant thing for a lot of people that the club space is opening downstairs. A lot of people have experienced some amazing times in there, and it was their first experience of Islington Mill. So that's going to be the format of the show this month. 2 interviews, bookended with 3 pieces of music selected by Emma Thompson, the curator and promoter of Fat Out Fest herself. And here is the first one. This is Lavender Rodriguez with Wind Down. I'm here in the Islington Mill venue space, the club space, with Al and Geordie, the, how do you describe yourselves? I like to describe you guys as the high-vis honeys, the handy people who keep the mill going, and you're currently full steam ahead in this space. Could you explain to me what's going on here in a very potted, quick way?
Yeah, so we have not had the venue since 2017.
Yeah. 5 years ago.
5 years.
Yeah.
And it has been 169A screen printers and Salford makers since. And under what's been a turmeric period of 3 years of construction, we're finally getting spaces back, including this one. And we're looking forward to an event this Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
With Fat Out Festival coming back and returning.
Yes. I'm going to be speaking to Riv Burns about that. So I'll get the details from them about what's actually happening this weekend. But just, can you guys tell me, so what are we looking at? For people who haven't been to the mill since maybe 2017, could you just give us a quick rundown of what was in here and where it's going to now?
What was in the venue specifically?
Yes.
Yes, so...
Well, actually, and just before you do that, I'm just going to make sure people, when they come to the mill, when you used to come to the mill to go to see a gig, we're now in the space where you would see that gig, where the bands would play and club nights happened.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
And all of it is completely stripped out at the minute, and I understand we've been looking at a kind of temporary setup for this weekend's event, and probably a few leading up to it until we get something a bit more permanent. And what that is unclear at this point, but it will become a similar thing to what it was. So the stage at the far end, as you come in, bar in the corner.
Yeah.
It'll look very similar to how it did.
Yeah.
Myself and Geordie are just fixing all the emergency lighting and making sure everything's safe.
Cool.
So people can have a safe old time.
Yeah. And are you, like, just because this is audio so people can't see, but we're stood in the room and it's pretty much bare. There's now going on, except what looks like the bar is still there in the corner. There's a...
Half a bar, yeah.
Half a bar.
Half, yeah.
Yeah. Is the stage going to be in the same place where it was previously?
Yeah, I imagine so. I can't see it being anywhere else. It's the best spot for it.
Yeah.
We've got these columns that are legendary, always in the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just needs to be there.
I remember one of the first gigs I ever came to see here was the band Fucked Up, and they're very, like, energetic punk band, and the singer Damien, who is himself quite a large guy, was hanging off, I think it was that pole there actually. It's hard to know now because some of them have been stripped out, and it just seemed like, oh my god, that's going to collapse at some point, but it didn't, thankfully. And it's still standing. So yeah, that says a lot about these poles that are not going anywhere. Can you tell me a bit more about what else has happened outside of this venue room space, because there's been a lot of work, like you mentioned, going on around the mill already. People who've passed by lately might have noticed that the whatchamacallits have come down. The scaffolding has come down. Can you give us a quick, brief overview of all the other changes that have been happening here?
Well, where to begin?
Yeah.
The Regent site, which has kind of we've been running where our temporary events over there, the warehouses, there's been decisions made on the council to kind of part demolish those, which Bill Murray and the rest of the directors have worked very hard with the council to ensure that we keep two of them for further development of the extension of this site, which is great. So that's happened. Whilst all that activity has been going on, Unit 2 specifically, which again, for people who can't see it, it's just a big warehouse on the other end. That's been where a lot of events have happened. So that's all starting to migrate back to this venue. And then we have adjacent, over the courtyard, we have New Islington Mill, or the other mill, name TBC. And that in itself has two large breakout spaces. We're calling them breakout spaces because they could be for events, they could be for performances, they could be for weddings, they could be for co-working. We're going to keep it as modular as possible over there is the plan. So we can have potentially two venues running at the same time, which would be nice and exciting. Yeah. We've got one floor above that, so on the first floor of the other mill, we've got rehearsal rooms, so music is coming back. Which there was obviously the mill years and years ago. What attracted me here myself was there was a big music collective here, who were kind of in amongst the visual artists, pissing everybody off to some degree with the noise. And so in this way, we'll have just music back. It'll be dedicated to a floor.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can do stuff like open studios in that way, where it's kind of like the squatty rehearsal room gigs, where you kind of enter into a room, watch a band, only 10 of you can fit in there, move on to another room, watch another. So there's exciting things to happen there.
Cool. Previously, when people would come to the mill for a gig or whatever, and then they'd go outside into the courtyard for a cigarette or just to chat to people, that building, which is the one on the other side of the courtyard, it always felt like a separate entity. It always felt like it wasn't, even though sometimes there were like things happening in both buildings at the same time, it always felt a bit like Islington Mill is the one on the left and that's the one on the right, if you know what I mean. Is there going to be more kind of integration of the two spaces moving forward?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So it's a huge connection, and the building opposite actually is a entrance and pathway through to the other extension site of Regent. So it's the warehouses.
Yeah.
So it's going to link up the whole site. So that building will become almost the main one, because it will be where people enter a lot more freely. As opposed to the Islington Mill entrance on James Street, which is where people will be coming on Friday, Saturday.
Okay.
People would enter from the Regent side.
How could you explain how that happens? If people...
So there's going to be a throughway, which will be double set of doors either side, one from the courtyard and then one onto the street of the other side. We've also got 4 units underneath on the ground floor that all go all the way through. Yeah. And then on the very end, which they're yet to do because they've yet to knock it all down, they're knocking it through, and there's going to be a big gate there, an entrance and fire escape, essentially, that will link that whole courtyard straight to the street as well. Cool. So there's plenty of ways to navigate the space. It'll feel a lot freer. And it'll feel unified as well.
Yes, and it will incorporate what's actually happening on Regent's Trading Estate unit.
Absolutely.
The units there much more fully into what's happening here, because like you said, at this moment you have to walk around up James Street, up onto the other street, and all the way back round to get into the other side of Islington Mill, the other half of it.
Correct.
Can you tell me what's going on the 5th floor and what's going on outside? Because I know that the scaffolding has come down, but the planned lift that's been planned and talked about for years and years and years isn't there yet.
Nope.
But can you tell me what is ready to go on the 5th floor and in the upstairs spaces that have been getting revamped?
Well, in a way, the lift and the fire escape for this building dictate what can happen on a 5th and 6th floor. Because of how big it is up there. Yeah. There's also domiciles for residencies or other things, other activities, people to just stay, that will be going on up there. A big open co-working chill-out space, which is double height, and then there's a mezzanine with another kind of living roomy kind of area, a large kitchen, multiple bathrooms. It's a lot more kitted out for artists in residence or whatever, and which is great because obviously when the B&B was running, that's where a lot of musicians stayed when they were performing. So this way there's artists in residence, musicians in residence, there's space for them, which is going to be great. Unfortunately, they can't occupy and sleep up there until these fire escapes are in.
Sure.
Because of, like I say, it's the full length of the building. The top floor is the full length, so it's quite a big building.
Fair enough. Another thing to mention is that windows have gone onto the ground floor. So anybody who's passing by can see into what used to be the gallery space.
Indeed.
Which is quite weird. How do you feel about that?
Great, light. It's amazing.
Yeah, cool.
It's always been quite dark in this building, and I think wherever we can get natural light in, it's a blessing, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the venue is still quite dark, but it needs to be for our neighbours'
sake. And I'm assuming we're not putting windows in here.
Correct.
Yeah.
All the windows that you see are in.
Okay, so, windows are all done. That's all the windows are done.
All the windows.
Cool. And Islington Mill is currently doing a project called Last Fridays, where on the last Friday of every month there's like an open day.
Yep.
We've already had the first one. The second one is going to be coming up this Friday, October the 28th. Can you just give us a quick run through of what people can see if they come down, or what's available to look at?
I suppose the idea is to open up again to the public and also people on our waiting list that have been there for ages, because going through this redevelopment we've had to shuffle tenants around. Really, it's been quite disruptive and disturbing for a lot of people, and we've tried to keep that at a minimum. but it's been what it is. So now things are starting to finally change and move. It's a chance for people to come and look. There's new spaces that have been created. See what people want to do with them, if they're interested in renting them, if they want to do performances, if they're anything else, events or whatever, people can come and see that now.
Yeah.
Start to get a bit of interest. So when we finally get this handover, lease signed, check, we're good to go and people are here.
Yeah. Does that mean that there's going to be more potential studio spaces to be rented out then than there was before?
Yeah, we get another, it's hard to say, about 30 new studios.
Oh, okay.
That.
Wow.
Maybe a bit more.
So that's a definitive yes to that then. There's going to be a lot more space for people to rent.
So it's a lot of things, yeah.
Cool, brilliant. And do you have any last words to add, Jordy? You've been very quiet in the background here the whole time.
Double glazing!
And I thank you.
Permeates secrets to even a piece you screen it. Messages wrote don't need decoding if you felt it good. Signs patrolling like a large foreboding, howling from the fox's mouth growling, feeling the air so cold and cloud and a threadbare of growling. The silence is stench of foul and full of numbers, trying to tell of the noise of the watchful wagons, slating what it means to be free. Imprinted like we skated on convenience from dawn to noon, moon comes late, desperate reps to delegate what we see on telly case. Keeping eyes out lives, so let's just database. Got to permeate, not the thoughts that stay awake. To try and keep up where my mind is at before the sell-by date. Noise, power, mind is far from relegates. Gotta make chance to sleep, that's a risk to take. Acknowledge the burden of the system's face, or being ignored. Unless I've got one to lose and a chance to save their fate. Pressure points, it's out. Rushing takes time to stake it out. If you want the truth be heard, prepare to repeat again. Repeat again. So the facts are out. Secrets, I got a permeate, even a piece, just read it. I got a permeate, even a piece, just read it. Permeate. Lines don't need to see, permeate. Felt it, permeate. I've got permeate, even a piece, just read it. Lines don't need to see. If you felt it, I've just been. No one gets reposts and quotes from others and recommendations to everything, like signs or symptoms, to even feelings of making distinctions. Yes, I'm aware of this pandemic moment is given, not just on anyone's own, yet why should we submit to a faceless body whose lacks of trust is ageless? Now they're clapping up with no remorse after slowly showing the truth and false. Pennies dropped from a magic tree, wrapped up around like plastic forms with leaves, realising their announcement to leave is so basic, yet hashtag own goal due to deluded complacence. Finger pointing to anyone who's even seen as a citizen adjacent, seen as a so-called art due to insecure self-placements. Why make a space where consideration of the big picture is so vacant? Criticisms are being vocal, yet it's silent during oppression, oblivious to the differences when it works to secure the position. I don't care if you like my work, in freedom there is a distinction. I make this transcend the tangible, so why are you in entanglement?
The sounds of Kobe Say there, another one of the acts we're going to be performing at this weekend's Fat Out Fest, live at Islington Mill. That is a tune called Permeated Secrets from a release called Conduit, I believe. And now, this is the second half of Islington Mill Ann's Fat Out Fest 2022 special. An interview with, in my opinion, one of the most legendary and unheralded promoters in all of Manchester and Salford of the past decade, and still is a very big and important figure for me personally, but I think most of the kind of underground and independent music people in Manchester should share the same opinion. I am talking about the promoter of Off of Their Heads, event booker, live gig booker, used to be the live band booker here at Islington Mill about a decade ago. Oh, less actually, but she started about a decade ago. It's the one and only, the formidable force that is Riv Burns, here to tell us all about Fat Out Fest 2022 and what the future holds for Islington Mill and potentially Manchester and Salford's live independent music scene. Riv Burns, welcome back to the Islington Mill podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks.
Yeah.
I know you're good, but I also know that you're very busy. I've seen you running around.
Yeah, sweeping
lately.
Stuff and lifting stuff.
For want of a better phrase, a bit like a headless chicken.
Hey, this is a...
I mean that in the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
No, I just mean that...
There's always a lot to do in these few days building up to a big event.
So what's going on?
What's going on is we're bringing Fat Out Fest back to Islington Mill for the first live music to be felt and witnessed and heard here for 5 years.
Right, cool.
Since me and Emma last did a show here. So it feels nice that we're the ones to reopen it as well.
Yeah.
A temporary experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels good. Closed it, opened it.
Yeah. Just for the benefit of the listeners, can you tell us why it shut? What happened then?
Yeah. So in 2017, the Mill Club Space closed its doors for a temporary period that was undisclosed at the time. We didn't know how long it would be, in order for the capital works of Islington Mill to take place. The mill has been through a huge regeneration process in order to fix the roof, basically, which was leaking all the way through the building. It's a crumbly old Victorian mill. Water gets in everywhere. It always finds a way, and it needed to be sorted before it found a way to collapse, basically, which was, a little bit squeaky bum time. So the Mill Club Space closed for the time being whilst all that was taking place because effectively the mill has been a building site for 5 years, so not a very safe place to run live music and club nights.
But that room wasn't empty, was it?
No. So as a temporary use, we had the Salford Makers moved in, who were a group of, I think at the time that they moved in, there was probably 8 of them sharing the studio, and ranged from kind of screen printing all the way through to digital printing, clothes making, jewellery making, and then by the time they moved out, I think there was 12 of them in there, or just creating their own craft and making their own way, and then doing a lot of courses and workshops across the city, and across Greater Manchester as well. So a really exciting bunch of people who are all still based in Islington Mill as well. They haven't been
cool.
displaced. They've moved into kind of 3 or 4 different smaller spaces now across the building. Okay. Which is really great that they're all still here.
I remember looking into is the official title of that room the club space, or is that just what we call it?
I think that's just what we call it. But I think it suits. Obviously. So I say obviously, when Fat Out were running it between 2015 and 2017, they renamed it the Borough. But I think it was always still the club. Yeah, that is But I remember looking into it when the Makers were in there, and it felt like the shape of the room was very different. It felt like they'd put in dividers to allocate studio spaces for people to do different things in different areas of it. And because this is an audio thing, not a visual thing, it's just a big empty room, right? Yeah. And now it's returning back to that kind of big empty room. There's no wall dividers in there. It's like you look in the door and you can see the 4 corners of the room. Yeah. Again, which, it hasn't been that way for the last 5 years. Yeah. So tell us what's happening this weekend then. It's a big weekend. This is why you've been running around being so busy. So tell us what's happening. So Fat Out Fest is coming back to the Mill. It's still been running. Obviously we had 2 years within those 5 years of a pandemic. But somehow Fat Out still fought its way through, run by the icon that is Emma Thompson, who will just never stop. So I think in 2020 2020, we did a digital fat out.
Yep.
2021, we were based at Regent Trading Estate and the White Hotel and the Pint Pot. And it was very wet and very cold and it was a lot. And then 2022, we are coming back to Islington Mill, also at the White Hotel for some afters into the early morning. So Friday night, we've got a big live music night curated by Emma herself, with the likes of Kobe Say, Hattis Noit, Lavender Rodriguez, Matters, and the return of Gassam Kunstwerk DJing as well. So that'll be kind of quite industrially, techno-y, chilled out, like take you through all the feels and all the flavours.
Industrial chill.
Well, yeah, Hattis Noit, honestly, check them out, they're absolutely incredible. But that night will take you on like a roller coaster of the extremities of odd, let's say. And then on the Friday, we open up in the afternoon with a collective called Eat Me, who are from Liverpool, who are going to do a drag cabaret dinner. So we've got a 3-course meal.
So is this a Saturday?
Saturday,
You said Friday, but yeah.
Oh, did I? Sorry, Saturday, yeah.
Saturday, so drag dinner, what time will that start?
That starts at 3 p.m.
Okay.
We have a 3-course meal between 4 and 6.
Wow.
And then at 7 p.m, that seamlessly runs into Off With The Heads, the return of.
Brilliant.
And I've collaborated with a performance artist called Sarah Marimba, and also with Fat Out. Myself and Fat Out booked the live music and the DJs, and then Sarah has booked and is performing some kind of immersive pieces throughout the evening at different points. So, and we're working with a visual artist called Jamie Robinson as well to create just like an experience or a feeling that you can get lost in, whether you know the music or you don't. And it's all about, I think that's what the Mill has always done such a good job of, is like you walk through the door, you've had this experience getting here and you're like, where am I? And you walk through the door and you just have this sense of like, I'm home. I've never been here before. I don't know what I'm about to experience, but I can be me. Yeah. And so hopefully in creating lots of visuals and lots of like different pockets of space where performance is happening, we can hopefully convey that as well for people who maybe might feel a little bit like, oh, I've not been here for 5 years, what do I do? And like a little overwhelmed or whatever, or they've never been here before. Yeah. And they can just get lost. Yeah. That's hopefully the aim.
Is it all going to take place in the club space or...
Yeah. So all that live stuff on both Friday and Saturday and the dinner will all happen in the club space. We will see the return of the Lurid Ultra Hybrid bar in the gallery space. So if you wanted to have a chill out moment, you can go and sit in Nick's bar and be served by the ghost of Pat Butcher, and just kind of relax and sit and chat with people and friends and maybe new friends.
Cool. That's what I meant. That are all the or most of the spaces available going to be being used this weekend? And I take it they are.
We're going to do our utmost too, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
We always do. If there's like a pocket of, like a slither of space, we always try to max it out. Yeah.
So you've covered Friday, Saturday. Is there something happening on Sunday?
Yeah, well, so then finishing off Saturday night, we head over to the White Hotel from midnight through to 7 a.m.
Okay, just so it's ending here at...
2 a.m.
It's ending here at 2 a.m. and it's starting off
crossover.
At White Hotel at midnight. Okay.
Yeah, little crossover there. White Hotel from midnight till 7 with Friction. And then Sunday, we come back to Islington Mill and we have a free event with Sarah Van Buren, who is a artist from New York who's doing a deep listening experience. And that takes place between 2 and 6, I believe.
In the club space?
In the club space.
Okay.
So that's a non-verbal, like, kind of experiential experience of music. So it's basically based on Pauline Olivieros' theory of deep listening and how we take in music and we take in sound. And it's going to be linked up to a sound recorder that's going to be taking in the sounds of James Street and like mixing all these things in. So yeah, that's kind of free to attend in the Mill Club space. A very relaxed Sunday, very relaxed. And then we go back over to the White Hotel from, I believe, 7 o'clock till 1. I might have the timings of that one wrong. Where we have the Return of Creatures, which was just an incredible event at the last Fat Out, and then has since happened in May. And yeah, just Bo, who curates that, is an absolute G. So really excited for that one as well.
Cool. So when I interviewed you on this podcast, it's almost 2 years ago now.
Is it? Wow.
Yeah, it is almost. I'm not
Bonkers.
100% sure of the date, but I interviewed Emma Thompson. I think it was in December.
Wow.
And maybe you were in January. But then I can't remember. Need to go back onto the archive.
That's a long time. Anyway.
Yeah, either way, it's still quite close to 2 years, and it's all on Spotify. If you want to go and check it out, it's all up on the Spotify channel. Yeah, we talked a lot about Off With Their Heads and how important that is to you, and you know, it must be a big deal to be bringing that back, right?
Yeah.
What does it mean? How does it feel?
It's huge, you know. Like, I did an accountability post on Facebook earlier this year because I've been talking about wanting to do it again for a long time, because I've been to a lot of events, especially like live music, where there's just like not great audiences, or I don't see myself reflected in the audiences to bands that once upon a time I was booking, like Mickey Blanco or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, this is just such a shame that these artists aren't performing. It's great they're performing to like new crowds, but it's like, where's their crowd at the same time?
Yeah.
And so I think from a live perspective in particular, I was always really interested and felt like I wanted to bring it back. So I did like a post earlier this year, and I was like, if anyone remembers it, hold me to this and make me do it. And so when Emma asked me if I would curate a night for Fat Out, I was like, hell yeah, like doing that with you as well. That's perfect.
Yeah.
This is the way. And to do it in like a kind of light touch way.
Yeah.
But then obviously everything that's happened this year as well is like, it just feels like now more than ever this is an important event to have. Because the whole reason that Off With Their Heads started was about kind of protest. It was based on the chants that students were shouting at Charles and Camilla's car back in 2011 of Off With Their Heads, Off With Their Heads, because they'd just done whatever they wanted with the system in order to get what they wanted, which was marriage at the time. Yeah. It's like, this is
completely different to where we are now, right?
Well, yeah. So, yeah, it came out of protest and was a moment for us to take all that frustration and put it into something creative for us, not for the will of anybody else. It was just an explosion for us as a outlet. And obviously everything that's happened this year, the last couple of years, it's just like this space needs to be created again. And so, yeah, I think it means a lot for me, but I hope that it means a lot for the community as well, to be able to come together and share those frustrations, in particular off the week that we've just had. And I think it's always been a really collaborative thing as well. So as you know, like, we did a lot of events together. So I really hope that it's a place where people can also kind of go, I've got this idea, I want to do it. Like, we wouldn't have had like the world record breaking wedding train if it wasn't somebody else's idea, and we make it happen. So so it means a lot, and I'm really kind of giddy about the space that we can create and the future of it again.
Can I ask you what was in this is really piqued my curiosity. Can I ask you what was in your accountability post? Like, what are the could you expand on that a bit?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it was kind of just like, I used to do this thing. I used to love it. I totally fell out of love with it because of the boys' club, and I felt pushed out from putting on gigs, so I stopped. I also kind of stopped working here, which at Islington Mill, which was a very supportive place for me to test and take risks, and nothing was ever like, well, that won't work. It was always like, give it a go. And there was like a kind of new setup here that meant that I didn't work here anymore. So I lost that kind of like support as well, I think, or that encouragement to take the risk that gave me the ability to fight the boys' club.
Yeah.
And then I think like over the years, like Manchester as a music city, in particular with live, has kind of been monopolised a little bit. And so as an independent operating within that, it's quite difficult. And I also lost a bit of money, too much. Like I think I had 2 or 3 gigs in a row that just like lost money. I was like, I can't do this for the time being while I don't have a job. I've got to pause it.
Yeah.
But so there was that like internal fight, which obviously, however many years, 10 years has passed since the last Off With Their Heads. I've done a lot of work.
No way. Has it been 10 years?
10 years.
Fuck.
I know. So I feel like way more ready again to take that on. Been fighting that fight, so I feel like it's better. I'm in a better place to actually make a difference with it. But for me, it's also about like creating a space where the next generation, i.e. the me of 10 years ago, can be given that platform to take that risk. Like that's what excites me the most about it.
So when you say an accountability post, it's more about your own personal accountability.
Yes, 100%. And I was like, please, like my community, my friends who are friends with me on Facebook, hold me to this, because I want to do it, but I know that I will chicken out and I'll put loads of other things ahead of it before I focus on that.
Cool.
But I want to do this because I think it's needed.
Yeah, that's great. That's very interesting. That wasn't quite what I was expecting, though. I think what I mean about, can you tell me what you feel the differences are between audiences now and audiences then? What has driven you to write the accountability post? Like what's going on?
I think it was just that it was the live queer scene feels not as prominent as it was like 10 to 12 years ago. And we have some incredible club nights, like amazing. I think we're probably the best city in this country right now for queer club nights. Like it's so good.
Bollocks.
Exactly. That's like, and they've been there from the very start, like riding it. Like Rod needs an MBE. But like in terms of the live aspect of that, like we used to have so many collectives putting on queer nights in a live setting, and there's not as many that I can see anymore. There's certainly none that are getting the big names. There's a lot of like DIY kind of underground stuff, but in terms of like the big names who have the agents and but then you look at the charts and it's just full of queer icons. And then so I think for me there was a bit of like trying to reclaim that. And creating the space where queer audiences can also feel comfortable watching queer bands.
I mean, surely the fact that Islington Mill stopped having a venue space is a massive part of that.
I think it played a big part, for sure.
Yeah, because this is something that me and my partner Joe, we've worked with you and we do promote our own stuff as well, have been talking about for the last couple of years, kind of since lockdown, sort of stuff. And it feels like there's very, very little spaces left in Manchester for ground level DIY things to have their break. Like speaking of both Off With Their Heads and Bollocks, like both of those clubs gave us our breaks and stuff. And we also worked in Legends, which is long gone now, but it was the kind of venue where like RIP, where they would just take a punt and they were like, yeah, you can have the main room for a couple £100. And we're like, wow. And that was so helpful to us to just establish what we were doing and our vibe and stuff. And we feel like there's not many places, if any. I mean, I don't want to name names because it's not about that. It's not about some kind of blaming people or shaming people or anything like that. It's not about that. But it is about recognizing that, like, that kind of, like, DIY grassroots level cheap spaces scene seems to have evaporated. Like, I don't know where, if I was, like you said, the you of you 10 years ago, if me and Joe, where would we go? Yeah. Where would we actually start Tranarchy? Where would we throw folk brawl? Like, I really don't know. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think there are a few still, like, doing some really good stuff, like the Pier Hat.
Yeah, Pier Hat is the kind of one that I think straight up, like, that's a very accessible, cheap, got really good programmed, very diverse anything goes kind of stuff. That's
Exactly.
great.
And ATMA is still a thing, like the old crack gallery. They have less events, I think, happen than, say, the Pier Hat does. I mean, the Pier Hat, I feel like they never close.
Yeah.
But that too is also pretty decent at supporting and giving chances. But, I mean, back when we were doing events 2010 to 2012, there was no, like, there were so many.
Yeah.
So many.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of pressure on venues, and I really feel it, and I think the Music Venues Trust do a really good job of trying to keep like grassroots venues going, because they're all facing such hardship at the moment, in particular with
that's very
energy
true.
crisis. Like, that's had a huge knock-on effect for grassroots venues in particular, and a lot of them are turning into like warm shelters this winter.
Wow.
So there goes your chance, because it's literally having to house people to stay alive.
That is nuts.
Yeah,
but
like
anyway, that's a separate conversation. I feel like.
The ecology of grassroots venues is struggling, and I think therefore the ecology for grassroots musicians is going to be impacted. And that's like probably one of my biggest fears. It's like really. It's actually sent me quite under the last couple of months, but I'm now feeling a bit more ready to take it on as a battle.
Good. You're the right person as well.
Thanks. So that it does worry me, and I think we're not going to feel the true extent of that. Well, we're not feeling it right now, but we will over the next 6 months or so as that pans out.
Right.
But yeah, we just got to get behind grassroots venues, and they won't survive unless we all start buying tickets. Ticket sales for grassroots venues are bad. So if there's one message to come out of this, it's yes, the Mill is back. Go support your grassroots venues and buy tickets.
It's interesting reflecting on that as well, because when I think about it now, that period like 10, 12 years ago, even though there was grassroots-ish stuff happening at the Mill seemed a level above grassroots stuff, if you know what I mean. It was slightly more developed. It was a bit more, I don't know how to describe it, but there was a bit more, it wasn't as, I don't know, anything goes-y, kind of like, I don't know how to articulate this, but it felt like the Mill was kind of like a step up from the grassroots venues, and it was the kind of place that would help people who were working in grassroots venues do bigger size things, or to collaborate with each other in a more kind of like, you know, larger space where more different kind of things can happen. But now looking at it, maybe when it reopens, the Mill will be a grassroots space again, considering what else is actually out there in Manchester at the moment.
Potentially,
yeah.
And I mean, we still, I mean, the Mill will have its battles to contend with, as every grassroots venue does. But I think we will only be stronger by tackling it together. Like, I think about the venues that are in and around this area, like the Pint Pot and the Eagle Inn and the King's Arms. Like, if we all can work together a bit more and synchronise, I think there's a way forward to it.
Let's leave it on that positive note.
Cool.
And remind everyone who's listening to this to come to Fat Out this weekend. Even if you listen to this in the future, hop in a time machine and come to Fat Out. Starting this Friday to Sunday. Yeah,
and buy a ticket. But yeah, come down. It's going to be absolutely great.
And there you have it. Everything you need to know about this year's Fat Out Fest 2022 and the reopening of the legendary Islington Mill club and live music venue space. Come down this weekend. It's going to be a gas. Big shout out to Bo Azra, who's also involved and is putting on Creatures of Catharsis, as Riv mentioned. Fantastic queer night. It's going to be happening at the White Hotel on Sunday. And of course, none other than Girl Boss herself. Girl Boss seems like an understatement of a term when it comes to Emma Thompson. Whatever the like maximized version of the elevated version of Girl Boss is, she is it. And she supplied us with 3 tunes curated from the artists who are performing at Fat Fest this weekend. You've already heard 2 of them. The first was Lavender Rodriguez with Wind Down. Then we heard Kobe Say with Permeated Secrets. And I'm going to play you out with Matters with a track called Within the Outer Fields.